everybody, it's Dexter Kendrick, your favorite kitchen witch, here to talk to you today about viruses. I know there's a lot of panic happening right now, especially with regard to COVID-19. I want to have a dialogue with you about not only viruses, what they are, and what you can do about it, but also give you some good news and then some not so good news. The not so good news is that there is absolutely no cure for any virus. And the good news is, although, that we actually will get through this. There's a number of things that you can do to make sure that you can withstand this storm. I'm going to swish this vinegar tonic, and I'll be right back with some information about viruses and you. First step in combating any virus for us as human beings is, of course, prevention. Usually it's a vaccine, but we do not have a vaccine currently for this COVID-19 outbreak. So we're going to skip past that and go right into what you can do. The first thing that we can do is begin to make sure that we are washing our hands. We need to wash our hands regularly. We need to wash our hands frequently. You should already have been doing that, but we want to make sure we're washing our hands at least 20 seconds. Some people say sing the happy birthday song twice or 3 times, just to be sure. You want to use warm water. You want to lather up your hands. You want to wet your hands first, then lather them up and wash, and include washing your wrists, right? The second thing that we can do under prevention is to make sure that we are not touching our face so frequently. So the average person touches their face a significant amount of times, especially their mouth and their nose. You want to keep your hands away from these mucous membranes as much as possible and avoid shaking hands with people. I know that in Western society as Americans, one of our cultures is to shake hands with strangers as a sign of hospitality. But at this time, self-care is probably going to be tantamount. So those 3 things will get you started on the prevention model. Next, we're going to talk about how to mobilize your immune system so that you can prevent getting sick in the first place. Next is my favorite part, and the part that actually takes place in the kitchen partly. So one of the things we can do is begin to use foods and herbal medicine as a means by which to mobilize our immune system. That's the second step when it comes to fighting any virus infection. The first step, of course, was prevention. The second step is mobilization. Once again, there's no cure for any virus, but what we can do is we can use certain things such as echinacea, that you can actually buy in capsule form, or you can grow it. I actually have some growing over here in my nursery, which I'll show you at some point. You can use echinacea in capsule form or in tea form to begin to mobilize your white blood cells at the first sign that something is off. Usually we'll have symptoms, which we're going to talk about in a second, to let us know that something is trying to invade our system. Another herb that I like, actually it's a food, is onion. Right? We can use onion, which has allicin in it, which is very helpful at mobilizing our immune system. It has antiviral properties. Also, its cousin garlic, which if you are a vampire buff like I am, you understand that the viral dialogue with garlic is trying to ward off any kind of infection from any kind of outside force. Ginger, lastly, is another herb that has some antiviral properties. All of these herbs are warming, and that is important for you to understand as we begin to understand that our body functions best in a warm climate. And this is why when people do get infected, eventually they will develop a fever, but that's not how viruses start, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. So I was at the gym the other day and I was drinking something out of my shaker bottle. And as you know, many supplements have like powders in them. Sometimes there's sediment at the bottom, and a little piece of sediment got caught in the left side of my throat. So I said, and started coughing really loudly. And then I looked up and it was like the gym had stopped. Everybody started stopping because I had like a little tickle in my throat. It was not a legitimate cough. It was like I was trying to dislodge something. So I know that the sensitivity and the panic around this thing is very real. So please try to keep your head. Please do meditation. Please wash your hands. Do the things that we can do to prevent infection, and you won't have to be hypervigilant. You won't have to feel so hypervigilant. Also, if you notice that the news is starting to talk about it too much, turn it off. Turn the channel. Turn to something else. I personally like Murder, She Wrote, Golden Girls. I'm watching Salem right now on Hulu. Check that out, right? Anything that can allow you to get into a different headspace. Secondly, I think it was important to understand is that COVID-19 is a bronchial infection. The difference between the flu and cold viruses, and they're both viruses, is that the flu is more bronchial, meaning that it will affect our lungs, eventually causing us to have fluid buildup, which could lead to pneumonia and really cause some really nasty things to happen in our system. But the cold is a head dialogue. The rhinovirus means it happens in our sinus cavities, affects our heads, usually starts off with some runny nose or sneezing, and we're going to cover the sneezing topic in just a second, but they are not the same thing. So if somebody is sneezing around you, I know we're hypersensitive right now, if somebody's sneezing around you, it's not likely that they have COVID-19. Now, you know, of course, we don't have any testing kits available right now, but just to take away some of the, I think people become very hypervigilant and nervous when they don't have information. So I think it's important to understand that coughing is something to perhaps be cautious about. Sneezing, not so much. The person still should cover their mouth because that's just common sense, common courtesy, and we don't want anything airborne coming our way, right? Secondly, and lastly, the symptoms of the onset, because we don't have testing kits, and so some people, before we become symptomatic with a cough, etc., we'll have other symptoms. There's usually a general malaise or icky feeling in our body. Typically, we have a tendency when infections just begin to feel more cold than warm. It's more difficult for us to get warm. We start to feel really cold. We may also have fluctuations of body temperature from hot to cold and hot to cold. Also, we'll typically have some kind of body aches as our inflammatory response begins to try to prevent further infection from going deeper into our system. The very last thing that I wanted to say regarding infections is the allergy angle. As the trees are starting to pollinate due to climate change, whether or not you believe in it or not, the dialogue regarding pollen and mold in our environment is a very real one for those of us who suffer with allergies. I do want to also make a recommendation of another herb called stinging nettle. You can grow it. If you grow it, it is very volatile. You have to use gloves because it will sting you. It has the same amount of venom in it that a bee sting has. However, once it's dried, etc., it is harmless and it's extremely effective as an antihistamine. I have found it to be even more powerful than Benadryl with absolutely zero side effects. So stinging nettle is an option. One of the things that's important to understand is right now that sometimes allergies and a cold, that we've stepped away from the bronchial dialogue of the flu, right? And now we're talking about allergies or a cold. The difference between allergies and a cold is the allergies should not give you any body aches. If it's body aches and sneezing and runny nose, it's more than likely a cold, especially if you're starting to have body temperature fluctuations. If it is just a stuffy head, a runny nose, itchy eyes maybe, but not right now at this time. It's still very early in the season. Itchy eyes and or dizziness, then it's probably inflammation in the sinus cavity. So this is an anti-inflammatory, antihistamine herb. So I highly recommend stinging nettle. I hope that we've broken down a number of these things for you. Prevention, mobilization, and care, and differentiated the difference between the cold, the flu, and allergies, which is minus any bodily aches and inflammatory response, etc. So if you have any questions, DM me. Let me know how you appreciate this video, if you appreciate it at all. And please share and like this video so that I can create more dialogues right here from my kitchen. See you soon.